Hello, hello, hello. Jordan Chariton live. Status Coup. What day is it? I don't know. Thursday, March 16th, year 2023 in the United Corporations of America. Delighted to be joined by a powerhouse team. Louis DeAngelis on the ground in East Palestine, Ohio. Your second week of reporting there. Zeynab Day, holding it down in Appalachia. Did I get it right? Appalachia. Getting it right there in Appalachia. And we have a lot to discuss, a lot to get to. Mainstream media, from what I could tell, has basically abandoned the East Palestine story, aside from occasional updates. We expected that. We told people that was going to happen. Fortunately, the community is helping us stay on it. So, Louis, let's start with you. We do have a EPA / Norfolk Southern story to share today, potential fuckery. But yeah, just kind of set the scene. Let's start actually with an image. Colin, do you have the picture of Louis in the car with his respirator? So you told us earlier that I guess this is like between two trips, your 10th or 11th day there. Yeah. And you said that it smells worse than it has since you've been there.
Yeah, I mean, I know it was the beginning of the week, and like just to give you some context, like in the beginning of the week, I wasn't saying that. In the beginning of the week, the weather was a little colder, it was snowier, and I was pleasantly surprised. It seemed like, okay, you could notice the smells if you were by the creek in that area, but it wasn't too bad otherwise. Yesterday, I started noticing a little bit more of the smells, and like you can feel it a little bit out if you spend too much time in town. You start to get a headache, this sort of thing. So yesterday I wasn't feeling great, and we wore respirators for part of the day yesterday as well. But today it's a little over 50 degrees outside, sunny, and this morning I was over closer to the derailment site again, like kind of the ground zero area, and I could tell right away. So I put the respirator on because I was already started. I'd only been there for a couple minutes. Started feeling off. I don't need to be a scientist or an expert to know what my body's telling me, basically. And that's something you hear from all sorts of folks. So I put the respirator on. It's impossible to conduct an interview with these. I know I could try, and you'd be happy with me if I were to do it, but just for the sake of having the conversations, I feel comfortable taking it off for 15 minutes or so and having these conversations. So I was doing an interview with Christy. We'll probably play some of this later today. She was on the live stream yesterday. And while we're talking in her backyard, and I actually mentioned it towards the end of the interview, I mean, the smell it was bad. It was really bad, to the point that both of our eyes were definitely dry. The smell was noticeable. I started getting a dull headache, all of this sort of thing. So right after that interview finished, put the respirator back on, and basically got out of town because, frankly, it's not worth messing around with. And the fact that these folks are having to deal with this on a daily basis is ridiculous. Again, there are air test machines out and about, but they're definitely not testing for the right things. There's all sorts of things going on because, again, I can just tell you from being there and tell you from talking to people who are having to, some of these people fortunately have been able to relocate, but a lot of them have to go in for their full day of work. And they're feeling sick when they're in at work. They're getting headaches every single day. A lot of these people are still getting nosebleeds and stuff. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened to me. But today, especially, it was very noticeable. Yesterday, it was noticeable. Even when I had Colin with me still, we were at one of the areas.
Like, Louis, did it have any familiarity to it, the smell?
I mean, it's hard to give a great description to it now, only because I feel like I've smelled so many of these different things on the past trips. The last time I was here, I was describing it as like a kind of a sweet smell. This one it's hard to describe other than it just smelled like chemical, almost metallic-y, chemical-y, something. Not something you would smell in the air ordinarily and be concerned about. It didn't even smell like, you can smell like diesel or engine burning or something like that, like we're running, and it didn't smell like that. So it's not something I've really smelled before, but the effect comes fairly quickly, unfortunately. And yeah, I mean, it was probably the most blatant example of me personally noticing, like, here's the smell, and then like feeling, firsthand what it was feeling like. So yeah, I mean, I spent a good chunk of my day wearing that respirator, which is, honestly, a lot of people are like, why aren't folks wearing respirators all day in town? All of this sort of stuff too. It's like, number one, getting the appropriate cartridges. Those are hard to find. Those cartridges I had to order because you can't buy them at like Home Depot or something like that. That's like a special cartridge meant for the cartridges being the pink parts there that attach on. Those are difficult to find. You can get cartridges at Home Depot, but those ones generally aren't going to protect you against some of these more harmful chemicals and chemical byproducts of what was on the train. So some of those are difficult to get, unfortunately. And then also, you wear that thing for an hour and your nose is killing. Like, it's not like just wearing a mask like during COVID. I mean, this thing is like more so like feels like it's almost suctioned onto your face more so. It's a lot of pressure on your nose and stuff. It's difficult to keep on all day. So yeah, I mean, I was hopeful earlier in the week when it was cold out, it was a little snowier, but I was assured by residents, because I made a comment, I think in the interview with Lonnie that we posted on here. If you haven't watched that yet after this live stream, definitely check it out. But, I made a comment to her. I was like, oh, the smells seem to be not so bad. And she was like, no, like, it's cold today. And you'll hear her say that it's cold today. It's snowing. That's helping us a lot. Wait until you get a warmer day. And today was the warmest day that I had in town. And I definitely noticed it.
I'm sure summer is going to be good then, huh?
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Yeah.
There's a lot to get to. And we have an interview you did today that, to be fair, we've reached out to the EPA. We've reached out to CTEH, which is a contractor, Norfolk Southern, the criminal railroad company, has been using to air test. So we reached out for comment about this. Haven't heard back yet. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear back. So a resident shared an experience with you yesterday that sure sounds like falsification of data to me. So you went back today to kind of follow up with her and get a couple more specifics. So we'll play that in a few minutes. But I just wanted to, before we show clips, I wanted to ask, has there been a ton of traffic and it's been really difficult for you to get to people's houses? Because I know there's like an army of other journalists there gushing to try and interview the residents. You have to wait around the block to get in to interview residents. Tell me about all the great journalism going on in East Palestine right now.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that there was going to be less media in town this time than last time, but nothing had prepared me for the ghost town of media that I've encountered. At the city council meeting that happened on Tuesday night, I've said this before, we were the only camera in the room. The only camera in the room. I'm not even sure that there was another journalist taking notes. There were a couple people with notebooks, but a lot of residents are carrying notebooks with them to these sorts of things to make sure that they're hoping to get information at these events. At that event, they got zero information, but we were the only camera at that. The only time that I've seen media anywhere on this trip was during there was a Pennsylvania House of Representatives hearing meeting where folks were testifying over the border in Pennsylvania. There were some local media there covering it, but most of them even left partway through the event to move on to the next story. So, I mean, when I'm going around town right now, folks are actually stopping me, which is a first for me. Folks are stopping me and being like the role. I'm just on my way back to the hotel earlier today. I finished up my interview with Chrissy, and a gentleman like stopped his car and pulled over and got out of the car and was like, "Oh, like, thanks for coming back." And it's like he's been watching Status. The amount of residents that I've talked to are watching Status Coup because nobody else is continuing to cover this is staggering. I get stopped in the hotel walking down to go get breakfast in the morning, and I hadn't had any coffee in me most of these times yet. And I'm talking to these people, and they're like, unfortunately, no one is here talking anymore about this. So folks are reaching out to me. They're passing around my phone number to be like, we got to talk to Louis because he's going to actually let you tell the story. Unfortunately, I wish for these people that CNN was here and the Washington Post was here and all these places. I genuinely do wish that they were here and continuing to cover this, but they're not. They're not here at all. last time I was here, you would see cable news vans everywhere and like all the big rental SUVs and whatnot, and all the local media and satellite trucks and all sorts of stuff when I was here the last time. They would all be in McDonald's using the Wi-Fi to continue to, type out their articles and everything. I stopped. McDonald's is like very much a little hub in the middle of town. And because again, this is a really small town, only 4,500 residents. I was in there earlier today for a little bit before meeting another resident for an interview. It was a ghost town. There was a couple local folks in there. No media left. Last time, you can ask John Farina about this, who was with me last time. There'd have been 10 different news crews spread out throughout McDonald's using the internet. So
isn't that interesting, Zayna? It's 41 days. I counted 41 days since this derailment. So that would mean 38 days since the controlled burn. We're not talking 3 years. We're talking a month and 2 weeks. I don't know. I've always felt when I'm on the road, hey, welcome, Grace just signed up as a YouTube member. I've always felt when I'm on the road that I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone here. We're in a catastrophe, yet there's no other media. And they're covering, years ago, it was Trump's tweets. Today, I see them covering DeSantis and Trump possibly getting indicted. Not saying not worthy of coverage, but people are getting sicker and sicker there, as you're seeing. And as we said, when the cameras leave, the cover-up begins. So let's get to that cover-up. Smash the like button. We got 240 people watching. We need everyone to press the like button. We are going to push you hard today. If you are not a Status Coup member, that's what's paying for Louis to be there. So we need more people to sign up. So thank you to Grace, who just got us started. Let's also give some other shout-outs because we got a member a little earlier. So welcome Grace, who just signed up as a member, and welcome Roanne signed up, Pete and Diane. So that's 4 today. So set it up, nice. Louis. You spoke with Chrissy yesterday. Tell us what brought you to her house and what brought you back today. The interview is ready, by the way.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, yesterday I spoke with Chrissy. She actually was one of these East Palestine residents who knew I was in town again and was doing anything she could to try to reach me. I mentioned in one of these live streams that I was staying at a hotel in Columbiana, and she actually called the hotel trying to get connected to my room.
Are you sure these people are calling for journalistic interviews or because they think you're handsome?
I don't know. Okay. But no. So she wasn't actually able to find it because the room was in Colin's name. But she then texted a bunch of people that I had interviewed. And I believe Moo actually connected, gave her my phone number. She gave me a call at 10:30, not last night, but the night before, and explained her situation a little bit, told me that there was some messed up stuff that went on with her air tests. And she had tried reaching out to folks. No one was listening to her. So yesterday we went. Initially, that live stream is up yesterday, and she mentioned a little bit about the air testing, and we talked a bit about it, but I wanted to go back today to get some additional clarification on some of this, because as I've been mentioning for the last kind of week and a half, 2 weeks almost, I've been digging into the residential air testing, and I've kind of known for a while that things are not exactly right. Been talking with experts about this. Been talking to residents. I've got lots of residents' actual home test data from this, from the tests that were done by CTEH. The EPA is also present during these tests, doing their own responses. And I mean, Chrissy was watching the test happen and saw one number on the screen of the device, and it beeped and alerted, and the members of CTEH and the EPA had to go and, they talked to each other for a second. They were noticeably alarmed by seeing this number and called their supervisors, both the EPA and CTEH, called their supervisors to get further guidance. And then when it came time to actually write the results down, it was listed at the lowest level that it was there, a level much lower than what she had seen on the screen. So some potential just forgery of the information being put down there. We're still, again, we're talking with other residents. This wouldn't surprise me at all. I have every reason to believe Chrissy and her story. She recounts the vast majority of what happened there during this. I've also talked to several other residents who vouched for Chrissy that she is someone who, again, would be absolutely truthful in this case. So I want to re-emphasize that a lot, that I fully believe she's saying the truth with what's going on here.
So before we go to the interview, let's just break it down here. We're talking about cooking the data. Mm-hmm. It's an allegation. We've reached out to them, EPA Region 5, as well as CTEH. If you don't know, just for a little background on CTEH, Colin, this is the New York Times story. Record of BP's Gulf worker testing firm raises conflict of interest questions. So this is from all the way back in 2010. The private contractor hired by BP after the Deepwater Horizon spill as the primary monitor of offshore workers in the Gulf of Mexico is no stranger to environmental calamity. After a million gallons of oil spilled on Louisiana town in 2005, after a flood of toxic coal ash smothered central Tennessee in 2008, and after defective Chinese drywall began plaguing Florida homeowners, the same firm was on the scene saying everything was fine. Now that Center for Toxicology and Environmental Health, CTEH, has a high-profile role in the Gulf spill, local community groups and other chemical testing veterans see a troubling pattern at work. As BP continues to claim that the leaking oil has caused no significant exposures, despite the hospitalization of several workers and the sparse release of test data, these observers of CTEH's work say the firm has a vested interest in finding a clean bill of health to satisfy its corporate employer. Quote, "It's essentially the fox guarding the chicken coop," said Nicholas Chermisnov, a former Exxon chemical engineer who now consults on pollution prevention. There is a huge incentive for them to underreport the size of the spill, and the same thing applies to the health and safety side. Another toxicologist familiar with CTEH who requested anonymity to avoid retribution described its chemical studies as designed to meet the goal of its clients. Quote, "They're paid to say everything's okay," this source said. Their work product is basically they find the least protective rules and regulations and rely on those. So that's concerning that this is who I don't know why Norfolk Southern is involved in the testing at all. That's right. Part of that is because 41 days later, folks, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine has not declared a state of emergency. I cannot emphasize this enough. Sure, it's easy to blame Biden, and we can do that. However, the Republican governor has not declared a state of emergency. Zeynab, him not declaring a state of emergency basically means that the EPA is in a secondary role. So right. Because of the Stafford Act, which was basically Republican governors and Republican legislatures around the country, beating their chest about states' rights, they didn't want the federal government to come in and seize control over responses to these kind of situations. So the Stafford Act basically made it that the federal government has to be asked by the state. Well, DeWine has not issued a state of emergency, which would bring in the EPA to basically take the lead. Now, that doesn't mean the EPA is, a bastion of integrity and has never falsified stuff. They have, but it's just alarming. Lewis is there 41 days later. The town fucking stinks. People we're talking to are traumatized. They're sick. And the governor, who won an overwhelming reelection, for whatever reason, has not declared a state of emergency. Your thoughts, Zeynab, before we start the video?
It feels like CTEH has been more of a public relations firm to come in and mitigate the results rather than truly testing. I would be interested to see as more organizations have offered to do independent testing. I know River Valley Organizing is organizing some independent testing. The university, U of L, University of Louisville, will be doing some independent testing. University of Kentucky. There are independent testing going on in regions that are nearby in Pennsylvania where environmental organizations are doing those. It will be interesting to see the juxtaposition when we start getting that information in. But as we know, these organizations have less resources. Oftentimes, these tests aren't cheap. The equipment's not cheap, and it can take a while for them to get their results back, while people in the meantime are being told that it's safe. And while no one, even in the town hall, I guess it was Friday before last Friday, where the EPA, Ohio 5 EPA regional head spoke, representatives from Norfolk spoke. None of them were clear on the pipeline to test for everything from vinyl chloride to dioxins. The pipeline of the testing procedures and then the EPA checking that testing is unclear. The only thing that's been clear so far from the EPA is if Norfolk Southern doesn't do their job, we're going to charge them triple in fines. Well, at that point, how sick are people and how long is that going to take?
Right. And also, I just want to add one thing to that, too. It's like, it's great that the independent testing is coming now. But what really needed to happen was all the right tests needed to be done 3 days after the controlled burn, when all of these residents were told that it was fine to go back to their houses. They were all told it was fine to go back to their houses when the only tests that they had to look at were tests from CTEH, which was hired by the railroad. That should be criminal. That should be criminal that these folks were told that they were okay to go back at this point. It's great that we're still testing now. They're still going to find things now based on, again, I described some of the symptoms that I was feeling earlier today. But at that point, I mean, think about how 3 days after the fact, they were told it's fine to go home. And many of these folks don't have the resources to continue to stay out of town. So they go back and breathe in who knows what. So
in 24 to 48 hours, residents were being told to shelter in place.
Yeah. In that
Not
time
leave,
in between.
Go in your homes, sit in your homes. Yeah.
So we headline this: East Palestine resident accuses Norfolk Southern of manipulating testing. So this is a resident, Chrissy. Her house is right above Sulphur Creek. Is that correct?
Sulphur Run. Yeah.
Sulphur Run, which you've seen people throwing rocks in Sulphur Run and all sorts of rainbow colors coming up. And no, not for LGBTQ pride, chemicals. So her house is right above this contaminated creek. That contaminated creek, not directly, but eventually ends up into the Ohio River, which serves a shit ton of people their water. So she told Louis some funny stuff was going on when CTEH and EPA, that's how it works. They both go into people's homes together. They're doing testing separately, but technically the EPA is supposed to be overseeing Norfolk Southern's contractor. This is a long interview. We're not going to play all of it right now, but let's play the first couple minutes to hear what happened in Chrissy's home.
Hey everybody, I am here with Chrissy Ferguson. We've spoken a little bit about the air testing that was done in her home already, but I just want to clarify on a couple things just to kind of go through that whole process one more time here. So I guess, do you want to start from the beginning of the air tests being done in your home? I believe it was on Super Bowl Sunday this year.
Super Bowl Sunday. It was, the appointment was supposed to be, I believe, at 3:30, but they were late coming because they wanted to come earlier and I wasn't ready yet. So they got here, I'd say it was like 4:30. It wasn't a full hour late, by no means. So I had my daughter here with me for the air test, and I was concerned. I did a little bit of researching on the company doing the testing.
And the company was CTEH that you're talking about?
Yes. I had seen some Facebook posts from other residents and started looking into them and seeing some discrepancies. So I wanted my daughter here to go over so she could see the results too with me, so it was not just me hearing them. So when they came up on the porch, I said, I want you to acknowledge the smell coming from my home, because other people had smells, but nothing was written on their paper. So I said, and you are going to smell this as soon as you walk through the door. And she was very kind to me and said, no problem. We acknowledge that. We'll write that. You know, we're here to help you guys, make sure it's safe. And I do believe she was a very sincere, helpful person.
Right. And I'll say, too, to back up what you're saying about CTEH as well, I mean, there is a history of CTEH doing, you know, making sure that test results come back in a good way in all sorts of different cleanup situations like this. They're frequently hired by companies like Norfolk Southern when they cause a big mess like this to come in and tell everybody that things are okay. They do that through a variety of ways, whether it be, you know, testing for the wrong things, doing broad tests for VOCs, not testing for all of the chemicals present, things of that nature. And it's also very true that there's probably good people who work for companies like CTEH, in your case, who are just, you know, trained on this is what you're supposed to do, this is the right way to do it, but that might not
testing for. And by no means am I saying that the regular workers out here that are exposed to are knowingly withholding information, but when they're told this, here's your kits, this is what you do, then you listen to your boss, you do that. That's what we all, most of us have bosses, and when they tell us we have to do something, we do it the way they want us to.
Right. So they come into the home, they note the smell that is in there. I guess what happens next at that point?
Yes. We go through each room to get readings. They went along the creek. They went down by the water to get readings. But when they got into the bedroom, my mother's bedroom and stepfather's bedroom, and the laundry room on the first floor, is when the results, the things started making the noise. It stayed a solid, because different things can set those tests off. And a candle can leave residue, but this was a solid.
Right.
It was confirmed solid.
So to be clear, so they're using, was it a handheld test device?
Yes. And then they also had that one that you break the glass in front, and you know,
it's more like a vacuum kind of tube. Yeah.
They did that too, but the handheld was what was really the issue was with the handheld.
And we have Chrissy's results, and we also have results from dozens of other residents at this point. This handheld device is, they've been using a various array of different versions of this device called the multi-ray. So there are many of them in question. There's a handful of issues with these, but we'll talk about those at the end of this. So the multi-ray device the handheld device that they're using, was it beeping or something, or was it just showing a higher level? What do you remember about that?
I know it was showing a higher level. I know it produced a sound to alert them, because they wouldn't have picked up on it, I don't think. When you're doing a test, you're talking, you know, the homeowner is talking about concerns with them, so I'm sure it alerted through a beep. I can't honestly remember, but I'm almost certain it did.
Gotcha.
And now the EPA's, their device was longer and bigger, and it looked more detailed. And
so to be clear too, so CTEH is present, but also a member of the EPA is present doing their own testing, correct?
Yes, along with the CTEH group.
Gotcha.
Yeah, there'll be two, and then there's the sheriff that comes in too.
Gotcha. And that's consistent with other folks we've seen. We even have, cell phone recordings as well as surveillance recordings in other homes of that being the case, where you've got multiple parties present and also a police officer present as well. Yes. Do you recall the readings that you saw on the CTEH device, what they were?
Two. I know two in the laundry room, but the opening to the laundry room and bedroom, the door was open, so the two rooms joined together. So hers was a 2 inside the laundry room. He was probably from me to you away from her. And he had what he wasn't wanting to reveal. And she finally, after repeatedly asking him, got him to say a 2-3. And that would have been in my mom and stepfather's bedroom.
Gotcha.
Where they lay.
And so this is on the CTEH device. And so CTEH's results on your sheet and on many other sheets for VOCs at least is measured in parts per million. Do you recall if this was a test for VOCs or if this was a test for something else?
It said VOC on the paper.
Okay.
And that area where that should have been wrote as the 2, it did have the VOC number as a 1.
Gotcha. And and then it's also many of the ones on the sheet and are like it's 0.1 parts per million. Do you know if this was like a 0.2 or a solid 2? Because I think on your sheet, I know it's now listed as a 0.1 parts per million.
She said to him, I have a 2.
Okay.
So it might have been a 0.2,
right.
But I didn't know what they were talking about
right.
to say, is it a 0.2? Because she said, what do you have? And when he wouldn't answer and she said it again on the 3rd time, before the 3rd time, she says, what, do you have a 2.9? And then he goes, no, I got a 2.3. What do you want me to do? And that's when she said, you need to call your supervisor because I'm calling mine.
Gotcha.
She showed concern. They said a special circumstance with the creek running underneath
your backyard.
our backyard and with the creek flooding in the basement when it's heavy rains. So, I mean, they genuinely took that serious and showed concern with that.
Right. And regardless of if it was a 0.2 or a solid 2, that is not the number that was written on your sheet.
No, it was not.
Gotcha.
It was not, and I could not hear the phone conversation when she called her supervisor. I could not hear what the supervisor said to her.
And to be clear on the supervisor call as well, was this CTEH calling their supervisor or the EPA?
Both.
Both. Okay.
She had made him call his, and she called hers, and he stepped away and did that. She was probably from me to the camera away, but I couldn't hear what the supervisor was saying.
And then I guess after both these, the EPA and CTEH separately call their supervisors, did they talk about any of this afterwards? Like in front of you, did you? Yeah.
No. That's when the toxicologist for her company came down.
From CTEH.
Yes. Okay. Yes, their toxicologist. But before that, his supervisor came down. But he was just telling me, well, you've got the creek. We're going to sort this out. Right. We'll figure this out.
So, and this is now a supervisor from the EPA also. Yes. So there's now a supervisor from the EPA here, in addition to the EPA person who was initially here.
Well, he had left.
Okay, so the initial EPA person leaves, and now a supervisor comes.
And the tester left. They both had left. And they had other readings to do in other homes. So they took off. And we waited. The EPA man came, and he had said to me about, well, we're going to have a toxicologist come down and explain this. And I said, okay, but, I'm concerned with the creek, the issues with the creek. I thought if they moved that boom, because they had it.
So there's about 12 minutes left of that, but I think we get the gist. We're going to we'll post the whole thing. First, I want to do this.
Breaking news. Breaking news.
Breaking news. Actual American journalism in the flesh. I mean, give it up, man. That was terrific.
Thank you. Thanks.
Really
I want to. No, thank you. And no, I'm glad. I mean, and we go through even more details after that. So when that gets posted, if you're not subscribed already, please make sure you hit the subscribe button down below so that you can see that video when it's fully posted. I see a couple things in the comments too that I just want to mention. There's people talking about the CDC update or the lethal exposure limits for vinyl chloride being at 100 or 100,000 parts per million. Vinyl chloride is not what is going to be present in these people's homes at this point. These are going to be the byproducts of vinyl chloride in a lot of cases. The vinyl chloride was basically just set on fire. But when you set vinyl chloride on fire, there are a couple things, and I won't get too detailed into this, but you're going to see chemicals such as phosgene, be a byproduct of vinyl chloride that's been burned. You're going to see formaldehyde as a byproduct of vinyl chloride that's been burned. You're going to see hydrogen chloride as a byproduct of vinyl chloride when it's burned. And then you're also going to see dioxins, which is a conversation that we've had a bunch of times here about dioxins, and other folks are talking about dioxins, but not a lot of folks are talking about those 3 other byproducts that I mentioned, which if you can smell any of those 3 other byproducts, you are already above the exposure limit for this. So, and also of note, with that multi-ray hand tool that they're using, the detector that's being used in the house, the detector cannot test for all of those chemicals at one time. I've spoken with a handful of experts on this at this point. You cannot test for formaldehyde and do a broad test for VOCs at the same time. I have seen 0 residential home test results that list formaldehyde in any sense. I've actually had a couple emails back and forth with some folks from EPA who haven't mentioned using any sort of special tip for formaldehyde as well. So there's a lot of concerns there, but the concern of these residential home tests should not be vinyl chloride. So the vinyl chloride parts per million numbers are basically irrelevant in this case, with the exception of if you were your home was like right there, which there are a couple homes that are like right there. It was very cold out the night of the derailment, so there is potentially a chance that some of it may have been there. But in most of town, vinyl chloride is not what you would want to be testing for, although they have been testing for it in people's homes and not finding it.
Let's break it down here. And by the way, Colin, we have to get a much better breaking news drop. That's a weird animated, weird sounding breaking news. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I want to say too, I've got a couple more minutes I can spend with you all, but I've got a bunch of residents who I'm going to be doing interviews with here shortly.
Got it.
So
So let me just read this so people understand the significance of these measurements. This is just from LCS Laboratory Inc. If you could pull that up, Colin. It's on the, there we go. So if you go down towards the bottom, VOC, that means volatile organic compounds. That's what they're testing for in these homes. VOC concentration of 0.5 mg/m's, parentheses, 0.1 to 0.2 parts per million or less is commonly accepted as the comfort level and used as a base criteria for clean buildings. So keep this up, Colin. So their measurements are in parts per millions. That's what they're using.
correct.
I don't want to get too complicated. Some measurements are done in parts per billion. You can convert parts per million to parts per billion, but the measurements that they were using in this testing, from what it sounds like, is parts per million.
Yes.
So when the people, the CTEH official and the EPA official are talking, I wasn't there, so this is just my guess. My assumption is they're saying that they are getting readings of 0.2 ppm or, 0.2 parts per million or 0.23.
Right.
Because
or even, when she mentions 2, 3, it could be that it was steady at 2 and it would occasionally bounce up to 3, like 0.2 to 0.3. It's a little unclear because I don't know, when she mentioned 2.9, I'm not sure what that might be, but it could have been just a solid 0.2 or a number that was reading between 0.2 and 0.3, and the device could be fluctuating back and forth between the two, is my guess.
Right. And we don't expect Chrissy to know. She's just looking at the screen, says 2, whatever. What we do know is it was reading higher than is the number they put down on the sheet. That, my friends, is called cooking the books. That's called falsifying data. And that's called manipulation. Because why, just common sense, why is the CTEH person calling their supervisor? Why is the EPA official calling their supervisor? Why do they leave and then a toxicologist comes in with another EPA official? Which, Louis, you told me that you spoke with other residents and that was not the case at their homes.
Right. So after this conversation, and again, if you see the full video that will be posted at some point after this, after the initial testers from CTEH and the EPA are in her home, they both call their respective supervisors. At that point, they leave. And a few minutes later, a supervisor for the EPA arrives, as well as a supervisor from CTEH and a toxicologist from CTEH arrive at Chrissy's home. They essentially, from what she told me and what you can hear in the interview, told her everything's fine. not to worry about it. Made some analogy about if you peel an onion, it might make you cry a little bit. You're not going to get sick from onions unless you eat more than can fit in your entire belly, and you're not going to get sick from it. So if you're getting a little bit of eye watering, that's fine. It's not enough to kill you, basically, is what the toxicologist was. I'm verbatim. I mean, that's what the toxicologist was essentially telling her in this meeting. So yeah. And I will say though that having an EPA supervisor arrive at your home and having a toxicologist from CTEH arrive at your home is not something that happened with any of the residents that I spoke with. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened at all. I want to be clear. We're still digging into some of this, but it is not consistent with several of the residents that I've spoken with. The air test people come. They, most of the time they're just getting because the 0.1 parts per million thing on the VOCs, that's great and all. But again, those three other chemicals that I mentioned are not going to pop up there. They're not going to pop up on that VOC reading. As well as dioxins are not going to pop up on that handheld device. It's just not going to happen.
So I don't know, Zeynab. Ain't my first rodeo. I know you've covered cooking of some data and books in the political realm, but common sense, they're calling in the cavalry. You got CTEH, the EPA official, the buzzers going off of this device. They seem freaked out. They're calling their supervisor. CTEH says to the EPA guy, what do you want me to do? And then when the resident gets the paperwork back, it's a whole point lower. I don't know. Sounds like.
Well, you would think they would just be cataloging the information. If it was unsafe, they would let them know it was unsafe. Like as simple as that. Why would you need to call the supervisor to ask what to report?
Right.
I mean, it's either safe or it's not safe. So the question would be, is it safe? We don't know what they asked. I mean, that could have potentially been part of it. But, she did overhear them asking, what are we going to do about this? Well, you report what you've read, right? I mean, if these people are here basically monitoring and reporting. So to have to call a supervisor, tells me that they were told either likely what to be expected, what to be, and maybe even what to put down. Because why else would you call your boss?
Right. And I want to bring up, I see another comment here that I think is important. So someone said here, you can't detect dioxins in air. I'm almost positive that you're correct. The way that you would want to test for dioxins, especially in someone's home or like outdoors would be in the soil. In somebody's home, I'm almost positive that it would be, and I've had experts tell me, at least testing for some of these other things, would be actually like wiping and collecting samples by like wiping surfaces and collecting samples in that manner to be able to test for some of these things. So none of that has been done by the EPA or by CTEH of actually like swabbing, materials in people's homes, whether it be their furniture, their walls, things like this. So you're definitely not going to get a dioxin reading with one of those little handheld wands, essentially.
That's interesting to hear that they're not testing any surfaces. And not to mention before that, they had a cleaning crew come in to clean off all the surfaces. And now they're not even testing any surfaces.
Well, we'll let Louis go, but the bottom line is we reached out to the EPA Region 5. We reached out to CTEH, asking them about this. We hope they get back. Maybe there's a plausible explanation. We'll be happy to update it if they have a plausible explanation. But I've learned to trust the residents. When I was in Flint, we knocked on 400 doors a couple years ago. We found that the state of Michigan's environmental department was manipulating water lead data. We got 35 residents on the record that they were manipulating by running people's water right before putting a sample bottle under it. Not the night before, like minutes before. So this is not the first time that we would have either a private contractor or the EPA or a state environmental agency manipulating data. We hope that's not the case, but I've read to you the history of CTEH, which seems to be that of a rubber stamp for corporations that contaminate communities. The EPA, I don't know what the EPA called their supervisor about. We don't know what the supervisors told them. All we know is the resident is saying it read higher than was given back to her on the final paperwork, which is very concerning. And as Aaron Brockovich told me once, if they're falsifying one test, you got to assume they're doing it across the board.
Absolutely. But before I go, I just want to say, this is now basically where I'm nearing. I'm still here for part of the day tomorrow, but nearing the end of my second week in East Palestine in total here. Each time you look into just another little element of this, case in point, what we just discussed right here, you can find more and more and more issues with the testing, more and more things being hidden and covered up, more and more. Any little rabbit hole you want to go into, you could spend 2 weeks just looking into that one thing and uncovering a whole bunch of corruption and messed up things. We're only able to do this if we can continue to get me out here. I'm willing to continue to come back to East Palestine. I told you already at the beginning of this, the rest of the media is gone. There's basically nobody left in town. Again, the other night at the city council meeting, we were the only camera in the room. That's bullshit. That shouldn't be the case. Where is CNN and MSNBC and Fox News and all these other folks who should be covering this thing? They are not here. If you're able to support us for $5 or $10 a month, literally the cost of a cheap beer or a cup of coffee at Starbucks a month, $5 or $10, please consider joining statuscoup.com/join. It makes it possible for Jordan to be able to get me back out here, or get Jordan back to Flint, to get John Farina out to different events and all sorts of things. So we want to be able to continue covering this sort of stuff. So please, it might seem like a small amount, $5 or $10, but it makes a big difference. And again, there is nobody else here covering this. It's insane. It's insane. We're about to have, and I'm going to have to leave. So Ashley, I know you can hear me. So I'm saying a quick hello to Ashley here. It's insane that residents like Ashley are having to work their butts off to try to get the message out there, to try to keep this in the limelight, and that the mainstream media isn't just covering this to begin with. So thank you guys for staying tuned with all this. Thank you all who've become members so far. We really appreciate it. I'm actually about to go in the hotel that I'm staying at right now. There are dozens of East Palestine residents who have been relocated here. So I'm actually, I've met a bunch of them the last couple of days. Some of them have helped organize getting a bunch of folks together tonight. So we're going to have a ton of interviews with residents who have been able to at least be able to relocate temporarily here, to, help continue to get their stories out. And that's only because of our paying members. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Go pee and eat before you do these interviews, and
Yeah.
we'll talk soon.
See ya.
Okay. We'll bring on Ashley in a minute. I think her feed froze. So we'll get her back there. But I got to say, I mean, we want to be responsible. So we are not saying, we got them. But it would not shock me at all. And residents and average people are very perceptive. So I think Chrissy, the resident in this case, was perceptive that these two officials were reacting in a way that it seemed like something was wrong or something was of concern. And that's why they called their supervisors, which concerns me that the resident then gets a test back that is clean bill of health, basically, and everything's fine. Because how could everything be fine if the house still smells?
With different numbers than what she heard while they were, evaluating what was going on.
Correct. I think we're having problems with her feed. So, Colin, if you could look into that in the back end. But while we're waiting for Ashley to come on, I wanted to play some of these clips that Louis did, because I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of numb to some of this by now because I've seen a lot of misery on the road. But watching this interview, it really affected me. And, I was almost tearing up because this is why we send Louis or I go, or, we go out there, because these are not like the 30-second sound bites you'll see on corporate media. These are not interviews that are cut. We air them in full. And these are the real raw stories of what's going on. Colin, if we could play some of Louis's interview with Lonnie, who is a resident and a small business owner as well in East Palestine.
What I encountered in my own home, You could smell the fumes outside. You could smell the fumes inside. I knew that we shouldn't be there. Yeah. No one should have been in their homes. We all should have been evacuated and told we need to evacuate or get us out as soon as that train derailed. Town should have been evacuated, and not just a 1 mile zone or a 2 mile zone. It should have been a 10-mile radius, in my opinion. Finding out later on Sunday morning when we had a knock on our door, the sheriff was going around doing a head count of who was still in the zone. And then being told that one of the tankers could possibly have a catastrophic failure and that it could blow at any minute. And knowing that that could have happened
Right.
from the moment the train derailed on Friday night, knowing that we were risking our lives basically 24, 36 hours later, and then being told that there could be a catastrophic failure and it could blow. And if it were to blow, it would wipe our town basically off the map. And no one came to help us. No one. I am furious that we were failed repeatedly. I am furious.
Yeah, I mean, again, the fact that if they're going door to door, I mean, there's number one, you should have been telling people to get out sooner if you at that point know that you've got cars that are leaking and potentially at the point of they're going to explode and send shrapnel.
That could have happened any moment.
Right. That's outrageous that wasn't
That's
spread out ahead of time.
That's criminal.
Yeah.
It is criminal what we endured that weekend. It's criminal what we're still enduring. I do not understand why we have been failed repeatedly.
Wow. That is really powerful. She's also having symptoms. I think Zaina went away for a minute, so we'll get it. I think Ashley is here. All right. There you are. Zaina's back. Ashley, I don't know how much you've heard from the show so far. This is Ashley, East Palestine resident, has been staying a couple miles out of town, but still experiencing symptoms. But based on Lewis's interview with a resident, it seems that CTEH and EPA officials doing air testing seem to be concerned at this resident's home, called their supervisors, and the paperwork she got had a lower reading than was in real time on the machine.
Yeah.
Surprising?
No, I kind of thought that in the way that their documents are wrote up, I wouldn't think any less of what they're doing. They're not writing the right things. They're putting VOCs or just a chemical in a bedroom. I mean, that it doesn't list exactly what. It's just wild. They're going into these homes and you're getting a low reading, but you can clearly smell something's wrong. It's just insane.
And, obviously we reached out to them. We'll see what they say, but I don't know. Seems odd to me that if a machine is going off, I don't know why it's going off, but they seem concerned. Why do you need to call your supervisor? Why don't you just put down what's on the machine and tell the resident this is a bad number, a good number? We know the private contractor in the past has had some interesting findings that always align with what the company wants to hear. I think this goes to the obvious question. Why is Norfolk Southern involved with anything other than giving you folks the money you deserve? Why are they involved with testing, cleanup? They should just be receiving the bills from the residents, the town, and paying up.
Yeah. If I burn someone's house down, you're not going to let me rebuild it. I mean, that's just wild that's what's going on. And I mean, it is really difficult to find those independent people as well. Like those air readings are really important. I mean, everything else they're doing, but inside your home is where you're going to be most of the time. You sleep there. Your kids are there playing. I don't understand why they're not even having another company come in to kind of bounce off of what they have. And if they're not going to do it and we have to do it independently, and we're seeing that inconsistencies even on the outside air, something's not adding up right. And this is just like in Louisiana, I think it was 1982, they had something similar with a derailment. It took them several months with the railroad shut down to dig a, I think, 50 feet hole to get the chemical out. And after 32 years or so, or 30 some years, they were just now saying they cleaned it and it's safe. And people have been living there. So we're kind of going through the same thing. So 30 years, maybe 40 years, we'll hear it's safe.
It's crazy. And I don't know, maybe you know something I don't know, and you could share whatever you want to share, because I know you've been getting some phone calls. It's 41 days. It's 41 days since this happened, and your governor has not issued a state of emergency. I don't know if he's on Hawaii time. No disrespect. Love Hawaii. I don't know what the reason is. A state of emergency would result in more federal resources. But what's going on there? Because the mainstream media is obviously gone. From what Louis was describing, it smells worse today and yesterday than it smelled when he was there last time. Residents are describing the clip we just showed with Lonnie. She's talking about her throat is closing up. We just did a story the other day on our Substack, which we had a picture from you too. You're not even in East Palestine. You're 4 miles away, but you're still getting rashes from your chin, your neck. Yeah, if you could scroll down, Colin, not to blow up your spot, Ashley, but so that's Kristen before the derailment. She lives in East Palestine. If you go down, you could see that's her after a shower last week in East Palestine on city water, not well water, city water. So clear a rash. That's her leg, her foot. You can see the rashes. And Ashley, who's staying in Darlington, which is just across. Keep going, Colin. Go down. Ashley, who's going and staying in Darlington, is right across the border, 4 miles away. You could see on your chin, your neck, your chest a little bit. And that's from showering, right?
Yeah, and on the back of my legs. And now I spoke with Erin about this because we've been showering off and on here with, we're not seeing anything consistently with it. But she said it could even be a contaminant in the air that when I'm going into the water here, it's activating it. So it could be that whenever I'm getting into the water and all this in the air. And I mean, anytime I go into town, I think I had sent you a video too. I started to get a rash on my face, and I was just at town hall and it started to get really hot. It felt like almost heat rash. It was hot to touch. It was uncomfortable. Sometimes it's itchy around my neck, the back of my neck, my hairline. There's that. My daughter just started to get a rash yesterday, and it was after the dogs came in and brought dirt in. And she's a kid, she's rolling around, and her ear was all red on the inside. Her face had a rash on it. I mean, at night from them doing the digging, our mouths are going numb going outside. So it's clear it's there. And if it's here that bad, it's worse over there. I can only imagine the people staying in there using their heaters and pulling more into their homes after they think their homes are clean.
And I mean, whatever you want to share, but has anyone contacted you? I know, I believe the governor has this network on his radar because we're the only ones still covering it, really. I mean, not the only one, but extensively, we're the only ones covering it. And it seems that some of the guests we've had on are strangely receiving phone calls from officials or being followed.
Yeah. And that's really common and weird, because why would we be followed for any reason? And that kind of sounds odd to anyone listening. Like, why are they being followed? Maybe they're just being a little bit crazy about this. But no, I noticed the same cars. We've noticed the same plates. I've talked to a couple other girls that had the same thing, same vehicle, same plate, just following them, driving by their homes, following me down the road. And then I would pull over, and it's funny, they turn around and go right back to following me again. So it's really weird. And then I did receive a phone call from DeWine's office. His secretary left me a message asking if he could talk with me about my home and my worries and concerns about my home. I tried to give him a call back, surprisingly.
An official from the
Secretary
governor's
called.
office called you when?
I think it was yesterday, to be exact.
Did they tell you why you won the lottery?
I'm not too sure. I mean, I don't know if it'll pick up, but I could definitely play it for everyone on here.
Sure.
So this was March 15th at 12:22.
Hello, my name is Dee Logan. I am calling from Governor Mike DeWine's office. We are reaching out to this number because we have received a message concerning your home. Please feel free to give us a call back. The number is 614-644-4357. Again, 614.
So he just repeats it. And when I call back, voicemail. I tried to call this morning. I was able to leave voicemail, but now when you call back again, it's full. I mean, I know I've said it on enough different outlets. Come to my house. You can be in there for an hour. See if you don't throw up. See if you don't pass out. If you think it's safe enough for you to be in there, then I'll understand. But I already know it's not safe.
Zeynab, you are the political person here. You worked for brand new Congress. You've worked on over 100 campaigns. You know about politics. You know about corruption. I don't think the governor's people are calling Ashley to talk about the weather. And I don't think they're calling Ashley out of the kindness of their heart. Somehow Ashley got on their radar.
I think it's that. And I also think they may be calling folks who have either been in the media or press, or, folks that have been calling them more adamantly in order to smooth over PR and at least leave that voicemail. It would be my guess. Especially considering when you called back, it was full and it's going straight to voicemail. That tells me that I feel like they're just reaching out to people to say, because one of the biggest criticisms that we've been hearing about DeWine is that he's not answering phone calls. He's only came to the town, twice now? And he's not responding, and he hasn't declared a state of emergency or used any kind of state funds to help, and is refusing to. So I think he's trying to cover for himself a little bit, having PR people call around. I hate to say that, because it would be great if he was actually calling Ashley and he was calling you to get something done. But I don't know how much faith we can have in that.
Yeah.
I tell you, I would call that. I would call that number back as soon as the voicemail clears up. You guys fill it up again.
Yeah.
Somebody said, too bad you're not a bank, Ashley, because the banks get help right away. Well,
they didn't even know my name. They didn't even say my name. Which I think is funny, because no, they didn't. And that's why I thought it was funny. We were given your number about a concern about your home. So, I mean, that's just weird. So they were just given my number. They don't know who I am. I don't know. It just sounded odd. I've never made a phone call and said, I'm just trying to get a hold of someone that has this phone number, or I'm calling to talk to this person, state their name. So
what's interesting to me too is, and that's not like an intern calling on behalf of the governor. That's somebody on his team, is my guess. And when they say to discuss your concerns, like basically just to discuss your feelings, like, no, there is something to be concerned about. And we've seen this with the governor over and over again, which is minimizing what's going on. We caught him in many contradictions where he says, he was asked by Wolf Blitzer, not exactly a tough interview, have you heard from any of the first responders of symptoms? He said, no, I haven't heard anything like that. Literally that day, he received a letter from railroad unions about railroad workers who were part of the cleanup having symptoms. And he received it before he did that interview. But he said, I haven't heard anything about that. He described with kids, we know kids have been sick because we've interviewed kids. that he was at a school and they were just playing basketball and having a great time and everything was fine. So it seems to me that, I mean, I don't know, but you've been active both on this network, elsewhere. You've spoken out publicly. You've helped organize other residents, so you're definitely on their radar. And in my experience, not just in Flint but elsewhere, generally how they play it is first they call you to kind of feel the person out. Is this person willing to play ball? And what I mean by that is, can we get this person, if we provide something for them, will they shut the fuck up? Or start towing our line? And Melissa Mays in Flint can tell you about that, because she's been offered straight up payoffs many times by the former governor, Rick Snyder's people. So, we'll see if they call you back. But yeah, they didn't just get your number. Somebody gave them your number. And yeah.
My guess is they are looking.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, they can look. I'm being as transparent as a piece of, clear plastic. Come on, like why would I make up stories? Like, it's sad. My kid even said, we had a little thing on his homework, and what's your wish if you caught a leprechaun? To go back home. But like, that kills me. So I wouldn't be making up a story to put my kids through this. Like, it's plain and simple. I mean, I'm not going to put them in harm's way. So if he wants to know, I'll tell him. Maybe he plays a regular type of game, but I'm straight to the facts. I'm not messing around.
And could you talk about, we're now 41 days after this happened, other than Norfolk Southern is providing temporary reimbursement to people within city limits. So if you live in East Palestine past the city limits, it's not like your block doesn't smell. It's not like your house doesn't smell, but they're only providing temporary relocation for people within city limits. And from what I've been told, even that, there's still people are having to kind of pull teeth to get the reimbursements, this and that. But other than that, it doesn't seem like you guys are getting a lot of help. You're continuing to get this testing that they tell you everything's fine, even though people are still having symptoms. They don't seem to be answering what's causing these symptoms if the testing is coming up fine. As far as I can tell, they haven't expanded healthcare for you folks to get expanded healthcare. So what's really going on other than them trying to say nothing to see here?
See, I don't even know. And it's weird because even if you look, we're really close to Brady's Run Park. I mean, probably about 12 miles away. Their water there is contaminated just as bad as it is up here. Like, you move rocks, there's stuff that comes up, you can see the contamination. So it should go way past where they're even saying in that mile radius. People outside of the area, their cows have died, chickens have died, people's cats, even indoor animals. A girl was telling me her hamsters died. All of them just started dying. So something's going on, and they're all outside of the area, or some of the people are outside the area. The other people inside, they're still experiencing it. But if you're 0.1 over that mile, too bad.
And how is your health, your kids' health? Obviously, you're not far from East Palestine. You're only a few miles away. But I've spoken with residents who have temporarily relocated further out, and their symptoms get a lot better as soon as they're far enough away. How's your health, your kids' health?
My kids are good. I did notice everyone in my house the other day was getting kind of like a red eye. My kids had that. I didn't know if it was because they're tired, but I don't want to really pass anything on. Irritated since then. It got a little bit better and then got a little worse because they started digging up. So as soon as we go outside, something happens, but we don't know if that air from outside coming in or the dirt on our shoes is going to dry and pick up into the air. We don't know. So, I mean, we are experiencing some things, but we're quite a ways away.
And Lastly, can you kind of just talk about the media? I mean, you guys were like the belle of the ball for about a week or two. The media was all over there, all over East Palestine, so you had plenty of attention. But I guess, I mean, from what Louis is saying and what I see, other than like a couple YouTube channels, and that's being generous, people have kind of moved on, and occasional updates. I mean, that's got to be frustrating when you're still very much like the crisis hasn't gotten any less urgent, but the media is not really treating it that way.
And it's sad because now more people want to talk, or they're looking at it and they're like, I should have talked. And I think Louis even mentioned that people were like, I should have said something. We need to talk about it more. And now I'm seeing it is worse, and the leaving and coming back, and kids with bloody noses coming back from school. And there are some people that have moved out of the area entirely that are far enough away. They're sending their kids to school. They're not having symptoms at their home, their family, just the kids that are going to school and coming back. So they're having bloody noses, and these people all want to be heard or want something to be done. Something's not right here. And the media being here was really helping get that message out and getting people to realize, hey, maybe there is something going on, but then it all went away. I have had a couple people from journals talk to me, but that's about the extent of it. No one's really coming in and covering as much.
Yeah. Well,
have you guys heard yet where the $1 million that's supposed to go, that's partly reinforcements, but then, the $1 million sort of down payment from Norfolk that was supposed to go, and the city council and community were supposed to find where that goes. Have you guys heard any information about that? I know that, there were folks on the community thread under the last city council meeting that were talking about, where's the money going? Why didn't we talk about the money? So I didn't know if that was something that had been on your mind or anything that you'd heard of, because it seems like it's allotted to them to hand out, but it's very, very unclear as to what that is and where it goes.
I think it should be publicly announced, and the whole town should actually vote on that. It shouldn't be just two people, because it's one person from the railroad and one person from the town to decide how to spend this money. So if they decide to rebuild the park and take everything out, bulldoze it and redo it, there's nothing that we could do. They might say, oh, it's better and healthy for the kids if we do this, tear out the grass, put down new grass or whatnot. Now we're all good. Now the kids have somewhere to play. So we don't know what they're really doing. I've heard they're putting in drains. They're like a little wading drain. You kind of drop down in and pull it out like a well. So you would pull out the little sample, test it. And I've seen them putting those in. So maybe they chose to do that for consistent testing of the water throughout the town. I'm not too sure, but it is kind of frustrating, because I think that us as a community, we should all have a vote on it.
And something I found super concerning, I don't know if you were there on Monday, but Louis went to the city council meeting and we were live from it. It wasn't really much of a meeting. It was just the local officials, the mayor, who's already flipped out on residents, talking amongst themselves. They said, if you want to ask questions, you have to send them in early. Residents did send in their questions early, but as far as I could tell, they didn't actually allow residents to ask questions. On one end, I'm not going to go hard at the part-time mayor who really has no power, but at the same time, you're having city council meetings, and from what I could tell, they were just trying to make it seem like back to normal business when you're in the middle of a petrochemical mushroom cloud, and it's not normal business. And residents could not, as far as I could tell, residents didn't get the opportunity to ask questions. I don't know if you saw that.
I did. It was kind of funny. The only good thing we got out of it is our water. We might not have to pay for the water right away. That's basically it. It might be waived. We're going to get our water shut off because there's no point in even having it in there. And I don't want it to be contaminated and go through my pipes and have to replace all my pipes if that's the case, if there is a chance something could be saved. I mean, really, there was nothing that was said, and I didn't even know where you could submit questions. And it was really last minute with all of it. I had no idea. Nothing was really answered. I don't know. I do a lot sometimes with this.
I guess lastly, I would just ask, I mean, I'm not trying to make this super political, but you don't have to be a financial expert to know that over the weekend, a major bank with some very, very wealthy depositors was about to fail, Silicon Valley Bank. People could argue whether they were bailed out or they weren't. I think it's clear they were. The majority of the heavy hitters that deposited, that had accounts in Silicon Valley Bank were big tech companies. And the government acted in 48 hours to rescue that bank, which is pretty much exactly what happened over a decade ago to rescue the financial system with bailouts of Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, Bank of America, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. If I was poisoned, I'd be a little pissed off if I'm now 41 days later and I'm begging for handouts, because that's really, well, not handouts, but you're begging for help. But the Dems and Republicans in DC, they sure acted like urgency when, big tech and depositors would have been financially hurt. It seems like there's a different priority for our government when it comes to big banks, wealthy tech scions versus working poor people in places like East Palestine.
Well, see, what really gets me and bothers me, and all the stuff that goes on around political stuff and all that. And I don't really keep up with it because it makes me more upset that I can't do anything at the scale I'm at personally. But at some point, I hope to be able to do something to change what they're doing here and the bank bailouts and all that. That's just wild that they have the time and money to spend on something like that. Like you said, go overseas on expensive visits to different areas just to talk with them about their problems, when that visit could help out a couple families here that are watching their kids with nosebleeds and rashes. And it's mind-blowing to me. And really, they're kind of treating Alan Shaw as a toddler. They're going to wipe his ass and tap him on the wrist and say, go ahead, now get back to what you were doing. It's all better now. And that's really what it is. It's frustrating.
And we've got the FDIC insurance, if anything happens to our money in the bank, great. There were people that got paychecks that had their paychecks held up that had to pay their families, and they got the money from the FDIC. I think that's a good thing. But where's our FDIC for these crises? Where, it's supposed to be the EPA. It's supposed to be federal emergency funds. It's supposed to be FEMA. Where are these organizations that we're paying in to? Why is it 38 days in, 42 days in, 38 days since the burn? Where are they? Why aren't they there? And, and when Alan Shaw spoke to Congress, speaking of Congress, he said, we're going to be giving 21 million and 4,400 families are going to be helped. But he couldn't give an exact description what any of that broke down to. Just a random number, 21 million, and then a random amount of families that it felt like he just rolled off the top. He just was like, what's the population of East Palestine? Okay, 4,400 families, 21 million. And we're not seeing some hotel reimbursements. I would love to see how much Norfolk has spent already. And
he would not answer. He would not answer Bernard Sanders. When Bernard Sanders asked, are you going to cover their healthcare expenses? Exactly. He would not answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was really odd how he was acting entirely, and all the questions he dodged everything. It was like, he is definitely in a game of dodgeball. He's not going to answer it. They even said, you're acting like a politician. So you could tell they were kind of upset about his actions towards that. Like, we are being serious with you. Are you going to take care of these people? Well, I can't promise that right now, basically. So, he's going to try to get away any way he can without doing that. Even the temporary right now, when they're doing all the stuff in town, when they're done with it, we're probably not going to see them anymore. Everything's going to be gone. No more help. No more. Our coverage for news is already gone. So it's you guys are probably going to be the only ones to see all of that getting taken away from us at once.
Well, we're stubborn fuckers here at Status Coup, and we tend to stay on things because, call me old-fashioned, I'm not okay with people being poisoned by their government and corporate America and then being left to die. So we'll stay on it. I'm sorry that you're still going through this. I'm glad Louis is there right now. We have a lot more for folks watching. We have a lot more interviews from Louis there that we're going to be publishing as the days go on. And we'll stay in touch with you, Ashley.
Yep. Well, thank you guys.
Stay on them, Ashley.
That's crazy. That's crazy that I'm not surprised, but the governor's people are calling her. Let's just say what this is. She's getting attention and she's raising a ruckus. I don't want to give us credit, but I will. I think she's been on our channel more than others, and we've grown 12,000 subscribers in 3 weeks. So welcome to the new subscribers. Feel free to sign up as a Status Coup member so we can keep the lights on and keep sending Louis back. Each one of these trips cost between, on the cheap end, $3,000, on the more expensive end, $5,000, depending how long we stay. So please sign up if you can, and welcome new member Genevieve. Just signed up, so that makes
Thank you, Genevieve.
That makes Genevieve signed up today. Also, Roanne, Pete, Diane, and Grace. So 5 members while we've been live. Listen, 450 people watching. I know all of you are not paying members, which is fine, but I know all of you. Well, not all of you. Most of you probably spend $5 to $10 a month on something you don't need, whether that be a burnt cup of coffee from Starbucks. It better be from a union Starbucks. A beer or maca tea or whatever the fuck you do. I'm not saying we're trying to take away your pleasures, but if you could redistribute that one expense towards real journalism, all we're asking is for $5 to $10 a month. We have different plans, and that your funding goes a long way, helping
And
to pay.
we're ad free. We don't have any advertisers, because sometimes
other than the ads YouTube stuffs on our videos, but yes.
Yes. But we don't have any, we're not out here, pitching supplements or whatever it might be. I understand some people do that, but sometimes that can bring pressures with it. We don't have any of that going on. We don't have any big corporate money funding us. We're not bankrolled by a Jeff Bezos. What we rely on to keep coverage coming in is and to be able to make it onto the ground and to be able to do the investigative work is folks that give $5-10 a month, the super chats that you guys make, if you're able to make donations. And joining membership for us can help set our monthly budget so that we know, hey, we've got this going on. We can set aside for this. We need to get down to Atlanta to cover Stop Cop City, or we need to get to, we need to get back to East Palestine. This other crisis has happened. We'll be speaking later on today about a train derailment in Washington state on indigenous lands. So things like that, to be able to send the crews there, we don't have the money that CNN or Vice News or even Democracy Now! And other organizations have. We rely on you and only you guys, and so every little bit helps. And sharing it out, joining, getting the notifications, and viewing also helps us. So
I'm glad you brought that up, because to give the behind the scenes, we kind of had I was torn because there was a week of action down in Atlanta for Cop City. And I would have loved to have been able to cover that on the ground and then send Louis back. But we just don't have the resources at this point to, after having Louis and John on the ground in East Palestine, to then send for a week a reporter and a camera person to Atlanta to then fund sending Louis back. It's all thousands and thousands of dollars. But if we keep building our membership, then we can do that. So that's kind of the blessing and the curse of being small and independent. you're liberated to cover really important things, but you got to find the money to cover really important things. So anyway, please sign up if you can. We'll keep shouting you out. I wanted to play 2 more clips from that interview with Lonnie, which I don't know about you, Zaina, but I was really, really affected listening to that. This is a resident, small business owner. The train derailment was basically in her front yard. Let's play the 2 other clips, Colin.
At Sunday, when we left before the catastrophic failure, and they said you have to leave, my husband and I landed at the Ramada in Beaver Falls, PA. And that night, when I went to take our dog out to the parking lot, she needed to use the restroom, I encountered 3 of the rail workers. Being naive, I actually stood there in the hallway of the hotel, and I thanked the elderly worker, the older gentleman. I thanked him for coming to help our town, and tell how naive I was. And he looked at me and he said, with a Southern accent, "Ma'am, this is my job." He says, "This is what we do. We're going to clean up this mess and we're going to move on to the next one. There'll be another one tomorrow." And he said it so nonchalantly and uncaring, and like it didn't matter, and that it's going to happen again. It absolutely terrified me. I went back to my hotel room and I sat on the floor and I cried. I just cried, knowing that what we were experiencing, the last 2.5 days of my life, that it's going to happen to someone else. And it has to stop. Something has to give. It has to stop. And I'm coming forward today because I want it to stop. We can't keep living like this in our country, in the world. These are people's lives at stake, and we matter. Our families matter. And it just breaks me. It just breaks me knowing that everything that we've lived through for the last month and a half, and that could happen. It could happen tonight. It could happen anywhere. And just feeling that no one is coming to help us.
No, I mean,
why are we not seeing this on CNN? Can somebody explain this to me? It's a rhetorical question. I know the answer. This is outrageous that this is going on in the wealthiest country on earth and nothing is being done. I don't want to hear about temporary reimbursement that these folks are getting. They should be getting a shit ton more. Frankly, they should have never been allowed to come back to this town. And welcome new Status Coup member Barb just signed up. Awesome.
Welcome, Barb. Thank you.
Let's
it
play.
It sticks out to me because it's trauma, and that's not something people are talking about. I mean, hearing the train accident, walking out in your front yard, seeing flames, seeing smoke, having it carry with you. It's that's one aspect that a lot of folks haven't even explored with this, is that lingering fear. So there's so many layers of impact that an incident like this has.
Absolutely. And welcome new Status Coup member Wendy. So now it's starting to come down. That's a good segue, Zaina, because the next clip is her actually acknowledging that she has PTSD from this and she's seeking counseling. Let's take a look at that and look at your phone.
I'm terrified that another one's going to happen, what happened to our town. That Sunday when we left before the catastrophic failure, and they said you have to leave, my husband and I landed at the Ramada in Beaver Falls, PA. And that night when I went to take our dog out to the parking lot, she needed to use the restroom, I encountered 3 of the rail workers. Being naive, I actually stood there in the hallway of the hotel and I thanked the elderly worker, the older gentleman. I thanked him for coming to help our town and tell how naive I was. And he looked at me and he said, with a Southern accent, "Ma'am, this is my job." He says, "This is what we do." And it's like a freaking fuse was lit that night. And it's just grown, and it snowballs, and no one is helping us. People are sick. Today, I know I'm feeling it. I feel it in my throat. I almost feel like my throat is tightening up. The first 2 days when I came back to my home, I was experiencing the rash on my chin and my cheek. I'm just going to openly admit that I am suffering forms of PTSD. I began counseling today for that. All I can say is we're in a living hell and no one is helping us. My family has yet to go to the Norfolk Southern Assistance Center. We have a pile of bills from our initial evacuation when we finally did leave before the catastrophic failure and their controlled burn. There's a pile of bills and receipts at my house, and I've yet to go there because I feel like families are being forced to go there and beg for money, for help, when it's not our fault. And families are sick, and children are sick. Mm-hmm. I have so many friends that their children have been to the doctor's office repeatedly for rashes and coughs. The headaches that you get that weekend, Friday into Saturday, I had the worst headache of my life. I think I ended up taking something like 4 or 6 Tylenol before Sunday afternoon. That headache was excruciating. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. No.
I gotta go for baby care. So Zeynab will be taking over from here. Welcome new Status Coup member Kenneth. Welcome new Status Coup Patreon Lisa. Welcome new Status Coup member Wendy. So now you're seeing the light, folks, and you're signing up. Thank you. The last thing I'll say before I hand it off to you, Zeynab, and by the way, we do need to cover another train derailment. This time, Mr. Warren Buffett, who is the largest owner of the railroad companies in the United Corporations of America, who spilled over, not him, but his railroad spilled over 5,000 gallons of diesel fuel in Washington. So Zeynab will cover that. But the last thing I'll say, and Zeynab, I think you touched on it, this isn't just physical. This is fucking, for some of these folks, this is permanent mental health challenges, permanent trauma. Can you imagine like just a mushroom cloud bomb shaking your house and cascading over your home? And if you watch that whole interview with Lonnie, it's up on the channel. We posted it earlier. Them having to make decisions whether their son should leave, whether the husband should stay with the dogs. I mean, this is really traumatic stuff. And not only the financial reimbursement for their homes, their health, but they should be paying for their mental health needs as well. I'll leave it to you, Zeynab. Thanks. Thank you. I got to go take care of the kid. But
Jordan,
stay and keep signing up. Bye-bye.
He's going to go take care of some baby duty. So what we're going to do before we head on to our next show or our next story is I'm going to go ahead and go through the super chats that we have so far. Colin, I can just pull them up here if that's easier as we go through them. Let's see. We had $9.99 from Leah Smith. Thank you so much, Leah. Thank you, Status Coup News. And I see BP Earthwatch in the chat, 2 of my favorite YouTubers on one stream. Hi, BP Earthwatch. And thank you so much, Leah. Kevin Perez, love the reporting you guys have been doing. Sending love from Flint via Chicago. Thank you so much, Kevin. Welcome new member Grace Walker. Some of these new members we may have already mentioned. So happy to have you. Ty Bayless is in the house, y'all. Y'all are killing it. Love y'all. And if you guys don't know, Ty will often host or co-host segments for us at Status Coup. Many times when we're not on the ground covering, this week is a little bit different because Louis has been on the ground in East Palestine, but Ty often will cover, generally on Tuesday night or Wednesday nights, I believe. He's been doing coverage regarding issues such as police violence, corporate corruption, even talks about the music industry sometimes. So it's really fun to watch Ty's shows. GB Kitties, you guys are the only heart, mind, body, and soul of news coverage that care. Thank you. I'm unable to financially support, but I'm sharing your coverage like crazy. Thank you so much, GB. Some people can't support financially. I know what that's like. You know, I'm an Appalachian single mom. But sharing, retweeting, you know, sharing out on Twitter, sharing here, just coming and joining our shows and joining in on the chat helps to get the story out. Even just smashing that like button literally will help to get the story out. So we appreciate any kind of support that can be given. Foggy Ozark, thanks so much for the super sticker. Standing Bear, we feel that way too. Some of these stories that we're hearing are heartbreaking and continuing, and these folks still aren't getting help. Danny Wyndham, thank you so much for the $10, Danny. Harless69, $5 super sticker. Thank you. Boz, thank you for the $11. Plays in the Dirt. I like that name. $10. This is from George Skinner. Thank you, George. Barb Schilling, $20. Thank you so much for your super sticker, Barb. Foggy Ozark, thank you so much for another super sticker. Das Bosch Fleisch, how you doing? Some of these stories feel like a John Grisham novel. Here are some bucks for Lewis's coffee. Thanks so much, Das Bosch Fleisch. And yeah, they kind of do feel like a John Grisham movie, and not. Hopefully the twist in this is that people get help, right? And Kenneth Wright, welcome new member Kenneth Wright. I will be reading some live chats later if more come our way. Thank you guys so much for joining in on the conversation. If you have any questions, any more comments, let us know. And we are going to be moving on to our next story, which is about another train derailment that happened in Washington State. Actually, a train company owned by Warren Buffett. This train company has spilled more than 5,000 gallons of petrol. Just so that you guys know, there's approximately 1,700 train derailments per year. That means that there are multiple train derailments, some 2 to 3 per day on average. But some of these trains are what railroad, you can pull it back up, Colin. Some of these trains are what railroad workers call bomb trains. And those are trains that are carrying substances that aren't necessarily commodities like grain and wheat and these are dangerous substances, chemicals that can cause either ecological damage or can cause the types of things that happened in East Palestine. So here we have an update from Raw News Alert. Multiple agencies and HAZMAT have responded to a BNSF freight train derailment in, I'm probably going to butcher this name, in Cortez, Washington. 2 locomotives, each capable of holding 3,500 gallons of fuel, overturned, and the majority of the spill was contained within a brim leading onto the land on the side of the tracks. Now, this land is also indigenous land. So the land itself isn't simply, and I'm pulling it up here so that I could get the name of the, it's on a Swinomish reservation. So as far as we've heard, we haven't seen any news of anyone being evacuated. There's not been any type of controlled burn situation. But also it's unclear as to what kind of effect this can have on the land, what kind of effect it can have. There's a few rivers nearby. There's a very large lake nearby this as well. So there's no news on whether or not that spill is impacting this, or whether or not the EPA will be called in to also to assist with the cleanup and to monitor the cleanup here. And as I had mentioned, this is something that happens frequently. 1,700 train derailments annually. That means that there's at least 2 to 3 train derailments per day. And if you guys recall, just a few months ago, railroad unions, particularly Norfolk Southern workers, were asking for paid days off because they're working, 24-hour days sometimes, not getting any rest, not having any sick leave. They were asking for better pay. And one of the things that they were asking for during their general strike, one of the things that they were asking for, that they were, the unions were calling for safer regulations on the railroad itself to prevent dangerous situation with what they deem as bomb trains. They wanted updated connectors. Those are the connectors that go between the trains. They wanted maintenance on the rail tracks to not only ensure their safety, but the safety of the public. Also calling for at least 2 conductors and a larger maintenance crew for each train, as well as more time prepping the trains to get them ready before they leave the station. It's one of the things that happens. I was speaking to a conductor for Norfolk Southern recently who was explaining that the time frames for how long it takes to get a train set up has been shortened. The time frames to check the connectors were once around 2 minutes, have now been shortened to around 45 seconds. So they're making people work thinner crews, work faster, work longer hours. And these trains are carrying hazardous materials, which we have to assume that there's going to be some amount of derailments that are going to happen. But these workers have been ringing the bell that there's going to be far more that are preventable. Many of these are preventable simply by investing in people, taking care of the workers, investing in equipment. And that's something that many of these railroad agencies, which are raking in tens of billions of dollars per year with CEOs with hundreds of million dollars contracts, that they're not willing to spend the extra on making sure that this country is safe. And Congress was unwilling, busting the strike, preventing railroad workers from striking, pushing them to go back to work by turning their backs on the unions. So that's where we're at. And that has now led all those whistleblowers, the unions calling for changes. And then this happens in Norfolk. And now we're seeing 5,000 gallons of oil being spilled on indigenous land in Washington state. What's next? We're hearing about these every couple of weeks. The controlled burn, quote unquote, controlled burn in East Palestine is one of the worst we've seen. And it's scary that it can happen again. So we can go on. Colin, I think that there is There are some videos in the bank, but I'm not sure what we've got next.
Yeah, we got or here, let me just take a look here. We have the clips from yesterday's live stream if people wanted some more background with Chrissy.
Okay.
And basically, we have a clip from different interviews. If you look at the brand on the side here, you can.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I forgot that I could see it myself. Let's see. Oh, I think this would be a good one to play, since we were talking about how the chemicals could impact people's health and what we should be testing for. We have an interview here that Louis did this week with an expert on let's see, I'm not sure what he does.
I filled rail cars. So way back when, about 25.
Oh, sorry about that, guys. I am new to this. Colin, do you care to play the interview with the former EPA agent?
I filled rail cars. So way back when, about 25 years ago, I filled rail cars. I had to do my own inspection on that rail car before I could even put product in it. Once I filled that product up, I had to reach out to Chemtrek. Mm-hmm. So on any hazardous material container going down the highway, the rails, Chemtrek is involved with that. So
we're having a little bit of technical difficulty with that one. Let's see here. Sorry about that, guys. I didn't know what interviews we had lined up to the point of speaking with Lonnie. So I'm getting a little bit familiarized with what we have loaded, because right now, Louis is on the ground. He's been speaking to dozens and dozens of residents. He has spoken to some officials. He's already gone to a city council meeting. He's crossed the border and started doing interviews in Pennsylvania. So he's speaking to people in surrounding areas, trying to figure out how it's been being handled on the Pennsylvania side as well. So we're getting a lot of content coming in from Louis, and we're wanting to share just a few of those highlights from the coverage he's had on the ground. And I can go in right now to a local resident that Louis has spoke to in Pennsylvania. And first we'll talk about Pennsylvania. He went to a local hearing in a nearby town in Pennsylvania. So we'll play a little bit of that as well.
Between Governor Shapiro and Governor DeWine, we asked, how do we go from one car the night before that we're concerned about to 5 cars that morning? And what other alternative courses of action were considered? And at that point in time, the individuals at the command post that were working on behalf of Norfolk Southern made it very clear that they had over 200, and this is a quote from the call, they had over 200 years worth of experience working this, and that was their recommendation. And they would not provide us any other alternative courses of action.
I've had several people reach out to me with health concerns from the beginning of the incident until just today. I had 2, one from a first responder, another from a citizen. Both have been here at this resource center. Obviously, I want to thank Governor Shapiro for that resource center and for having your team here. And you've said you've done surveys. Has there been any diagnosis? Is there any connection between the coughs, the sore throats, headaches to this, or is it too soon to say?
I think it is too soon to say. We're still collecting surveys. We're going to collect surveys through the end of the month. And then really it's a matter of going back and looking at what those surveys show. Is there a pattern? And the information will be gathered and analyzed, and we should have some results, I hope, within a couple of weeks of finishing the surveys.
With what degree of certainty are we looking at here that what we are testing for is actually the threat that is in the ground, air, or water?
So we have made sure that those hundreds of them is included, the ones that were actually on this train, to make sure, we can talk about some of the testing around things like dioxin and other things like that, which are sort of ever present in the atmosphere at any given moment. But the testing is specific. There's another form of testing called SVOC testing, which is really around particulate matter, and that is what might come off during just a large fire, right? Like it's soot, it's smoke, it's the kind of damage that might occur and impact the respiratory issue around just a large kind of fire event with smoke, and that's about the plume and all of that. But the VOC testing will give you what you need in order to see the levels and the results.
I have dealt with Norfolk Southern in my capacity as Borough Council President, and I was told in no uncertain terms by multiple different Pennsylvania departments, I've heard from DCED, from PUC, from PennDOT, that we've given away our power to do anything about these railroads. And when it was mentioned earlier that the quote from Norfolk Southern was, "We have over 200 years of experience," I was told we gave away our rights 200 years ago, actually was the quote that I was told in trying to deal with Norfolk Southern from a local government perspective. I was very struck and shocked and a little bit horrified earlier when it was mentioned that we have Department of Environmental Protection, we have emergency management, we have all of these different layers of things working together, focusing on statistical models, etc. But ultimately, it sounds as if the decision about what to do was just made by Norfolk Southern. And have we just given away our rights to do anything about these railroads that go through our communities? My law office, where I'm a sole practitioner, is across the street from a Norfolk Southern train track. If we have a derailment, I'll die that moment. So I'm very concerned that we have given away our power to do anything about these derailments. Is there anything that local government can do? Is there anything that we as state government can do to take back some of that power? What is the command structure such that it was just allowed to a decision to burn 5 cars worth of very terrifying materials to the average person? I'm not a scientist, but these things are terrifying to the average person. What kind of command structure is there, and what can we put in place, if anything, as legislators, to take back some of that power so that you don't have very educated, smart people looking at statistical models, but ultimately saying, okay, Norfolk Southern, if you want to burn your train cars full of stuff, I guess it's up to you.
Whew. That was Abigail Salisbury, and she's one of the House representatives in Pennsylvania State House. And she was calling for this committee meeting as it was a bipartisan effort in the Pennsylvania State House in order to delve into it, to bring not only members of the EPA, but people directly from Norfolk Southern, and subpoenaed them to bring them in to answer questions from the Pennsylvania State House. We haven't seen anything like this from Ohio. We haven't seen anything like this from Mike DeWine. And just to fill you in a little bit on Abigail Salisbury, she is in District 34. That district, for those of you who may not know, that district butts right up against the Ohio-Pennsylvania border. So there are communities there that are just 10, 20, 30 miles away from East Palestine. It's right there. Very close to East Palestine is also what's referred to as the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia. So the very tip top of the state of West Virginia meets. So what happened in East Palestine happened very close to state lines of both West Virginia and Pennsylvania. But the State House in Pennsylvania has been more on top of testing and held a committee meeting this week, which you just saw a clip from, with Abigail Salisbury asking a very good question. And that was, why are the people who caused this issue in the first place the ones responsible for cleaning it up? That and without proper oversight. And I think that's the question that people are asking. She also asked about dioxins. She also asked about whether or not VOC testing was extensive enough to know whether or not these areas are safe. The Pennsylvania State House has also been pushing to expand the area that gets assistance from this disaster as well, and making sure that it's safe in the surrounding states, as well as the water is safe in the Ohio River Valley water table region, which impacts Southern Ohio. It impacts parts of West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Northern Kentucky. All of these areas in the Ohio River Valley basin rely on water for their families, many of them from the Ohio River, as well as the tributaries that are leading out of East Palestine. That's exactly what they feed into, and that's the Ohio River. And it's eventually going to go there. Luckily, many states are testing the river as we speak. And Pennsylvania is one of those that is doing private independent testing. So we'll, keep following up. Louis was in town this week, so he was able to catch some of this hearing. And as I had mentioned, was able to speak to some Pennsylvania residents on the ground. But it is expensive to travel. It can be anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 to do an on-the-ground trip, depending on how long we stay. We usually have a camera crew person, and then someone who's an independent journalist like Louis, who goes out to actually speak to people on the ground. As we know, we can't just take the government line to be the answer on anything, from Cop City in Atlanta, which we recently covered, to what's happening in East Palestine right now. The people who generally will give the most accurate information are the people that are there on the ground, living through it, and their voice needs to be heard. So if you can, we've already had 6 new members tonight sign up. Memberships, you can join for anywhere from $5 and up. If you want to give more, you can give more than $5 a month. It may not seem like a lot, but every little bit that folks can donate and give helps us. Newspapers are on their way out. Mainstream media are funded by millionaires and billionaires and are biased as hell. We are reliant only on small dollar contributors, folks like you, folks that support us. That keeps our lights on. That keeps the engines running so that we can go to places like East Palestine. And you can sign up at statuscoup.com/join. We will be staying on this East Palestine story as things develop. We are planning to send people back in the future, as well as doing some updates. We have been getting some leads in about things that are happening, other workplace disasters or issues, other ecological problems that are recent or maybe even a few years old and still not being taken care of. Just like Jordan Sheridan covered Flint for the last 6 years when the mainstream media abandoned them. We plan to stay on top of these stories. We plan to continue this type of investigative work. So any little bit helps. Also, super chats help. Another thing that helps is subscribe, like this video, and share it out. Follow us on social media at Status Coup on YouTube and also on Facebook. What we're going to do is I am going to go ahead and dip out for the evening, but we are going to play some videos that we have. I believe that we have 2 interviews from Pennsylvania, And then if we could, Colin, if we could also play that last video from, play a little bit more of the video from Chrissy. I think that there was maybe a follow-up. Nope, we have a video from Ashley. So if you could play that and the 2 Pennsylvania interviews as well. And then we can, I think we can call it a night. And thank you guys so much for joining us. Let's check out, a little roundup of the interviews that Louis has been doing on the ground. We will be bringing more content and full videos and these full interviews in clips throughout, in videos throughout the next several days. So please, if you're not subscribed, subscribe for updates. If you're not subscribed on our Substack, that's another great place to get updates and to also get stories. We release stories on there often, as you saw one of our pieces today, where folks had told us that they had been having rashes and other health problems. We broke that story on Substack. So you can go to statuscoup.substack.com and subscribe or become a member there as well. And that way you'll get notifications, because YouTube doesn't always send out notifications, but we do send out notifications on Substack, as well as publish our written pieces there. All right. And thanks again for everyone who joined. Welcome to all of our new members. You all are amazing. Welcome to everyone new that came today, that joined our chat. Thank you guys so much for weighing in. Thank you for the concern that you're showing for the people of East Palestine in your comments, and appreciate all the support. Stay tuned for more from Louis, because as I said, he's going to be in East Palestine, and as he mentioned, for the next day and a half. So we'll have a lot more coverage from that. We also have some updates coming to you guys. Tina Desiree Berg has been, one of our hosts, has been talking to folks down in Atlanta about the massive $80 million, it's been raised to $91 million police training facility that's being built on native lands, one of the few large parks that they had left in Atlanta, a few green spaces. They're building a more than 200-acre massive police complex, and the citizens are not happy about it. We've been covering that for several months now, and Tina Desiree Berg has some interviews coming up. It has been an autopsy has been done on the person who was killed there, showing that bullet holes were on both sides of their hands, and that their hands were raised, and they were sitting cross-legged. So it's unlikely that Tortuguita, which was who they referred to, had a weapon. So there are a lot of developments with Cop City in Atlanta as well. We'll be bringing more coverage from East Palestine. Sign up, like, subscribe, all that stuff. And again, thank you guys. Any support that you can give helps, and we appreciate it.
I'm here with Kristen. We're in Darlington, Pennsylvania. We're halfway through a meeting here with several of the Pennsylvania state representatives. I saw you in the back here with this. I'm just curious, first off, I guess, what your take on all of this is, and why you're actually out here today to come see this?
Well, I applauded the last representative when she said, we have no control over our federal railways. I mean, Norfolk Southern is dictating everything to us, and this is a public service announcement that was put out at 3:16, and it said just to evacuate a mile. So this is 4.3 miles. This is my house. We got another alert at 15:46, which is 3:45. I believe they ignited the train car around 4:15 or 4:10 or so. And this is from the top of my hill. We are 4.3 miles away. We are not in this mile or the 2 mile. And it is our understanding that it was the evacuation for the mile to 2 mile was because if the train car exploded and there was metal and debris flying.
Yep.
So this is the rest of my house from the window, and so my windows were all taped up and plasticed because I didn't have time to evacuate.
Right.
And so after this, I sheltered in place in the basement, and stayed there for probably 8 to 10 hours just to make sure. Watched the beef cattle that were in our pasture, making sure that they were still alive. I mean, this is a disaster. It's not a drill. And somebody needs to be accountable. And I think we're, as a public and as a township and as a people who are concerned, are very smart and very educated, and we're not going to stand for this.
Right.
So I appreciate everybody that's coming out and stuff, but it needs to be addressed now. It's almost 7 weeks this has happened.
Right. Clearly, it is ridiculous that this happened.
Whew. People are upset from around the surrounding counties, and that brings me to, I didn't leave yet. I wasn't lying to you guys, I promise. But that brings me to, we have 2 other clips that Jordan just messaged me about, and I want to make sure that you guys see those, because Louis had mentioned these when he was on with us. He had mentioned the response from the city council meeting. Ashley mentioned too how folks weren't heard. They weren't able to ask questions. There was very limited information that was given to them. And these are 2 interviews specifically from the city council meeting in East Palestine from this week. And we wanted to be sure that we showed those 2 since Louis mentioned them today. And it really does highlight the fact that individuals are not getting the information that they want. And, city council, just like Jordan always says, we can't necessarily blame a small town mayor. City council only has limited options to be able to help people. This is really on Norfolk Southern, and even more so on Governor DeWine, Mike DeWine of Ohio, who refuses to call a state of emergency and is more than willing to basically let the police investigate themselves, which is what's happening here with Norfolk Southern, cleaning up the mess that they created when they have a profit motive and an incentive to spend less and center saving money instead of helping folks. So let's hear what they've got to say at the city council meeting. And again, you guys have a great night. Go to statuscoup.com/join to become a member. We appreciate you. Stay tuned. The next several days, we'll be bringing out more and more footage from East Palestine because Louis has talked to dozens and dozens of people, and we have several stories to break. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Mayor's report. The dirt has finally started to move to a EPA-regulated facility in Indiana. The cleanup is still ongoing, and it's going to go on for some time. The track, one side of the track is still ripped up and will be ripped up for a while. And there's been 6 million gallons of contaminated water hauled off site as of today.
You've actually had some complications as a result of some of this going on here.
Yes. So I saw hospitalist at the free clinic they have set up here in East Palestine. I saw her 10 days ago, and she diagnosed me with a lung injury. She said there's no indication of infection, which I told her I agreed. I didn't feel that I was had an infection. So she said it could take months to recover from this. So I have now a chronic cough. I've been coughing for 6 weeks, and that's about the gist of it. I have asthma, so I do have inhalers that I use, which my rescue inhaler I almost never used until this happened, and now I have to use it frequently. So the attorneys we consulted with said to save the furnace filter, so we changed the furnace filter and we have it saved in a garbage bag. And I can't find, trying to find resources because I don't know what to get my blood tested, who's going to, for these chemicals. I haven't found any of that information yet.
So that information is hard to find, basically, is what you're saying.
Yes. And, of course, Norfolk Southern CEO is not supporting the community, which is exactly what I expected. And I'll be very surprised if these lawsuits come to fruition. I'll be pleasantly surprised if it does happen. So.
Do you live in the 1 mile radius area, or are you close to that?
I live in bordering Middleton Township. I live 5 miles that direction.
Wow. 5 miles away. And I will say, too, I was surprised that you said that they actually diagnosed you with something at this clinic, because we were in town about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago at this point. And at that point, the clinic was not diagnosing anyone with anything. They weren't testing anyone for anything. They were essentially just providing someone to talk to, which, granted, that element of it is good, but they were just providing referrals to doctors. They actually gave you a diagnosis for this.
Yes, she did. Yes, she did. I wish I could remember her name, but she's a hospitalist at East Liverpool City Hospital. Yeah. Wow. So.
And again, that should be a glaring red flag, though, that you live. I mean, how many miles would you approximate? 5 miles or so?
5 miles that direction, yes.
5 miles away, and you had a doctor at the clinic say that this is as a result of
injury. That's exactly what she said, and that's what she charted. Right. So here we are.
Here we are, and also notably, here we are right now. Folks are still having issues with some of this stuff, especially folks who live closer right now with the soil being dug up. And some of these folks are having a hard time getting relocation. They're having to fight tooth and nail to be able to get it, even when they're having symptoms.
Absolutely. That's why what I mean. Norfolk Southern is not helping any of us, and they're throwing that water up in the air, and then the chemicals are dissipating into the atmosphere. So how is that, safe? So anyway.
One more question for you, if it's okay. I guess, were you expecting more from the city council meeting tonight as far as actual information to the public on stuff?
Yes, I thought we were going to get some information about people who have ongoing health issues. I need more resources. I need more. I know they're doing their best. I know they're working hard. It's just hard. It's hard to navigate all this because we're not getting answers. We're not getting help. I'm sorry.
But. No, you're fine. And frankly, the local government here is only going to be able to provide so much. This is this is a town of 4,500 people. It's not like they don't have a chemicals expert on staff or anything like that. Really, this is where the state government should be stepping in, and the fact that a state of emergency and.
Thank you. FEMA, Federal Emergency Management, should be relocating all of us. I mean, they should be here. I'm not going to say I'm sorry because the attorney said, stop apologizing. You're a victim.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's.
I hope.
We live here. We have 11 acres. What am I going to do? I mean, we live here. I'm not renting. If I was renting, I would move out and break my lease right now. So.
You're in a situation. You're not in a position, right? No one's going to buy your house at this point. No one's looking.
Small 11-acre farm, and we're, yes, right.
On the farming end of it, do you actually plant crops or anything, or do you have livestock or anything on the property?
Small garden. We had livestock. Yeah. Well, we only have chickens now.
Okay. I mean, are you concerned at all about any of the, they're now starting to do soil testing and this sort of stuff? Are you concerned at all about
We're on the list because now they're finally testing the water in Middleton Township, the free testing. There was no ash on the ground from the uncontrolled burn. I called it the uncontrolled burn. I didn't see any ash, so that was, that was a relief. No, I don't. I think it's okay. I think the soil's okay. This just happened, I think, the night of the burn, this lung injury, so.
Well, I hope that it turns out okay for you and you start to feel better. I appreciate you taking the time. So joined here by So joined here by Jusha. You've seen her on the channel a couple times at this point. I guess first off, what were your impressions of the meeting tonight? Were you expecting more information about actually what's going on here?
Yeah, I was waiting for it to kind of start, and I was hoping they had some sort of schedule that led to a question section, especially because we've all been wanting answers, and they kind of said that they were going to be doing weekly meetings. However, I feel like they never even kind of looked at us to listen or to hear what we were saying. They feel like they was just we're just going to do our thing here and pretend like you guys aren't here. I have a lot of unanswered questions, and I was wondering if I was allowed to interrupt at certain points but I was no one else was talking, so I wasn't sure. Right. It was kind of it was kind of weird like that. It was kind of really vague. I wasn't really sure what was going to happen next or when we were going to have a chance to get some questions out. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I was under the impression that there was. I had been told that a couple residents had been able to add their names to an agenda as long as they had submitted by Friday.
I heard that literally on the way over here, someone asked if I'd submitted my questions, and I said, to what? From where? Because I wasn't even sure this was actually even happening because it hadn't been announced anywhere really. There was a Facebook page that said council meeting, a regular council meeting at 7 p.m. and then the date, and that was it. And that was 3 days ago, and then no one's heard anything since. So it feels like they just don't care. They don't want to listen. They're not actively trying to listen. So yeah, I wish there would have been more information about a lot of things and more communication with us, but it felt like they just tried to ignore the fact that we were sitting there.
Right. It felt like a very normal council meeting, as if nothing had happened recently.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then they were talking about the water shutoffs, and it says next month we're going to start it. I was well, people some people might not even be getting their mail. They're in hotels right now because they can't go home. They're not using that water either.
You're a perfect example of that. Yeah. How long have you been in a hotel at this point?
Since February 3rd. I just got my Airbnb today, but it's been a hotel since then, and it has not been a vacation by any means. With my son, our 2 cats living on top of each other, not sure what's going to happen from hour to hour, getting pressure from a lot of different angles in my life, and it's I wish this were easier. It's not a vacation. It's not been fun.
Right. And have you been able to get any assistance from Norfolk Southern for paying for this at this point? Are you in the zone? Are they actually, because some people are getting it, which is great. I hope you are, and some people are struggling to get assistance from them.
Yeah, it's super wishy-washy about who gets it and who doesn't. And I mean, they've told me I was in it, and then I was out, and then I was in and out, and then it's not even going by the mile, the evacuation zone anymore. It's city limits, and it depends on who you are. There's people in the same situation as me who has had their air tested okay by their group, which is still obviously not okay. We're still getting sick. It still smells. Some people have been compensated for their hotel stays since then, and I had a 2-week period where I wasn't, and now I am because of this whole temporary relocation, but it's a joke. And $1,000 for a family. I mean, it costs $1,500 for a 1 week at an Airbnb, which is lower rates than a hotel sometimes.
Yeah, no, it's insane. I'm glad you brought up the point that it's not like you're going and enjoying your time staying at this hotel. No. You've got all of your belongings are in town here, right? In your house for the most part. You take what you can with you to go deal with this sort of stuff, and then you're running back and forth. You don't have all your things with you. To your point, you've got your pets, your kids, all in one room. You don't have a stove to cook on. You're eating
not reimbursing us for any of that stuff. So we got $1,000 for my son and I, which it actually doesn't even cover a week's worth of just lodging alone. And then they said they're going to cover food and gas. But everything else is just we're left to replace on our own or go without, and that's not fair.
And food and gas is tough too, because food, again, you're staying in a hotel. It's not like you can cook. Food means going out to eat, and if you're trying to do that on a budget, it means eating food that's terrible to eat every day. Basically, it's
really stressful too, because I hate going out, and I was actively trying to live healthier and cooking more, and now it's my only alternative to eat out, and it sucks, and I'm being withheld from living my life the way I want to. It's not a good time.
One last question for you, because I know it's cold. I know that early on your child was not doing well with this and having lots of complications. You've stayed away from town, and you've been able to do that, which is great. Have they been doing okay since being away from East Palestine?
So yes and no. So he had a couple days of rashes that healed up, but he's been so he's got family he stays with sometimes in Chippewa, and we were being told that's just not included in any of this. But we actually evacuated a second time the day of the burn from Chippewa because we saw the cloud roll in. Well, now sometimes he's coming back from being in Chippewa with a little bit of rash on his face, and it's been coming and going, but he's there on and off sporadically through the week. So I'm concerned about that, and he's been showing some signs of being just really fatigued. And I'm just concerned about that because he hasn't had any other kind of reactions like that since he was a baby, when he was just really sensitive to a lot of stuff. So, I mean, mentally, he's struggling a lot. He misses his friends. He doesn't, well, we've tried to, like, fit it in between trying to find, like, where to live and everything, and it's just been hard for him as an only child, too.
Okay, right afterwards is fine. Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's been really stressful. He doesn't really understand why some of his friends are going back to school and then other ones aren't. Some of them are getting sick, and he's afraid. He's afraid for them, and it's really hard to talk about it because his little friends are, you know, their moms are calling me and said, hey, like, they're having nosebleeds, so we just went to the ER. And my son's 9. Like, that's traumatizing. It's not been easy at all for any of us.
I believe you talked with Jordan a little bit about a friend of yours who's been getting some rashes and whatnot too. So you have several folks that you know who are starting to experience this now. And I know I spoke with a lot of folks getting rashes. I guess, is that something that's still prevalent today? We're now basically almost 5 weeks away, 5 weeks out from when this happened, and that's still prevalent.
It seems like it's getting worse too. So it's, I mean, even the nosebleeds and everything is getting worse as well. Or more people are noticing it, and especially with them tearing up everything right now. You can kind of hear it in the background. They're moving the dirt around. Earlier when it wasn't snowing, it wasn't as cold, I was starting to have the burning nose, just riding in my car down the street.
Right. Fortunately, it's like a little bit windy right now, and I think it's coming from not necessarily the right direction. So we're okay for the moment, at least. But yeah, definitely. I mean, you can hear, I don't know if the audio will pick it up, but you can take my word for it too. We can hear the construction vehicles moving back and forth, not far away from where we're at right now. I guess, do you want to explain, you showed us a tree earlier. We'll have some footage of it to show viewers right now, but do you want to explain what we were seeing there? It was the tree stump just up the road. So all this white stuff here seeping. It's hard to see with the snow, but this white stuff seeping on the edge of the tree. Interesting. And this tree had been cut down for a while, and these white kind of marks on it are new, basically.
Yeah. And I did question the EPA agent that was out here, and he kind of brushed off and said it was fungus, and I said, that's not fungus.
Gotcha.
Like, I know fungus, it's not.
Right.
So.
And the EPA was taking samples, soil samples in this area and in the area we were just at. The area we were just at was about 2 miles or so away. We're now closer in, maybe estimating a bit closer to the mile marker from the derailment.
Mile.
We're into the mile now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Looked like it was seeping something chemically wise is the only thing I can explain, or something not organic, just not something that happens. I am kind of frequent with foraging and molds, funguses, and it doesn't look like any kind of fungus I've seen, and that's what the EPA agent said, oh, it's probably a fungus, and you know, just brushing it off. And I said, that's nothing like I've ever seen. And I brought it up in a group and I was talking with, and I said, you know, there is dog vomit slime, and it's a type of mold, which it could be that, but it's not puffy. So that was kind of odd that wasn't the case. And then there's another kind of flux mold that was brought up, and it doesn't look like that either. And that's where trees seep like a white or greenish kind of mold. And that doesn't look like anything that I've ever seen.